Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Empowered Musician of the Month for 2023. Today, we will usher in the new year with the legend herself, Dana Varga. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you, Maya.
Now, if you've already been following the Empowered Musician, then you probably have already heard Dana spit some truth on your timeline. She really doesn't need no introduction, but for those of you who don't know her, Dana Lynne Varga is a classical soprano, incredible teacher, career coach, mom of two, and she's created some really incredible artistic communities, including the Empowered Musician and also Mass Opera, which she's the artistic director of and founder of. Um, she wears all the hats. I bet there's even more things that I'm missing out on, Dana.
I think you got most of them.
Well, you're a straight shooter when it comes out to calling the classical vocal industry and the reality of today's singers. And through your coachings, master classes, lectures, you arm us with the tools that we need to survive in a progressively difficult field. I'm wondering how you kind of got into this field. I know that you started out college as a psych minor and you were on the track to become a therapist. Is that correct? What
Yeah, I
shifted your
originally right. I originally applied to school as a psychology major and then, but my heart was kind of always leaning towards the music thing, but it is and always has been a passion of mine. I think mental health is really important and I like helping people and uh making the decision to switch to music was a good one, but a hard one. And I switched to music ed because I also come from teachers and had that teaching blood and thought that's what I wanted to do. So I went from a major to a psych minor, which was really fulfilling. I enjoyed those courses so much, and I definitely think that both my education in music ed before I ultimately switched to vocal performance, as well as my minor in psychology, both were super helpful in becoming a voice teacher and an arts administrator and an advocate because I've always carried with me the things that I learned from that part of my education as well.
I know your parents are also entrepreneurs and have really successful careers for themselves. And I'm wondering if you were just destined to be this like awesome boss lady.
Well,
You,
certainly wasn't the plan. I thought that I would do something stable. I've always had
mm,
anxiety and been an anxious person. So, in my younger years, the idea of a straight path, something, you know, a sure thing was appealing. But I did have excellent role models. It was my anxiety mostly that made me think I couldn't do that. But yes, my father was a working jazz bassist for many, many years and then switched careers slightly towards becoming towards becoming a luthier. So he now makes basses and has basses all over the world in many major orchestras and opera houses. And my mother ran a very successful editing and typing service for many years before she then decided to use her multi-language skills. She speaks 5 languages to become a high school teacher. And that's what she did for the second half of her career. And yeah, so I had great role models in running your own business and following your passion. And I'm glad that that fateful day in sophomore year of college, I went to observe in the classroom since I was a music ed major. I went to observe and I was like, no way. I have so much respect for music teachers because there's just no way I could handle that. It's a lot. And I knew that that wasn't for me. And ultimately, I call it the invisible hand. The invisible hand pulled me to where I am now. But it's been a lot of trust and a lot of fear, especially as an anxious person.
oh, wow. I can relate to the anxiety bit. I guess I'm interested to pick your brain a bit more how that anxiety has shifted throughout your career. Has it helped you or aided you in any way?
Some
What?
of my
Yeah.
best friends always say that, uh, my productivity in a lot of ways and my accomplishments are partially due to being so anxious, right? Like the toxic productivity, which, you know, you can feel about it how you will, but I'm not someone who does well doing nothing. And as I've aged, I'm 41 now, I've gotten better and better at setting aside time for whatever rest means to me, right? Because I'm never going to be a sit and do nothing person. That's not what rest is to me. But finding restful activities is something that I'm now able to do. But for many, many years, especially in the grind of the 20s and early 30s, I just accomplished and accomplished and accomplished. And a lot of that was just in this never ending quest to allay the anxiety, which is a fruitless endeavor, by the way. But you know, I'm proud of everything I've accomplished, but certainly my buddy along the way has always been the anxiety. And that's with medication. So, you know, I've been medicated since I was 13. I have no doubt that I would be in a very different place, a different career at least, if I hadn't been. And I used to suffer from terrible, debilitating panic attacks. So, you know, I'm a medicated, productive, anxious person. It's not like it magically goes away. You know, that's not really a thing. You just learn to manage it.
Wow, thank you so much for opening up about that. I guess going on to another kind of place of vulnerability, I know that a lot of singers, young singers in conservatory, have also gone through a bit of objectification, body shaming, typecasting, and I know that you talk about this in your young adult life. I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about how some of this stuff has affected you in your career, and then also any tips to people who are also going through that same sort of thing.
Totally. So I'm in that funny generation that's in between Gen X and millennials. So we're called Zennials, right? I was born in 1981, and we're like this strange transitory generation. And I dealt with what just about anybody who's female dealt with, who decided to go the vocal performance slash conservatory path at that time. I was in school from 99 to 2005 for the 2 degrees. Um, and what that means is that at that time, and there's still a lot of this, right? A ton of it, but not quite as much as there was then. It was just standard fare to have people comment on your body. There was nobody thought twice about it, you know. And I was very heavy, very, very heavy, and everybody around me wanted to make sure I knew that. You know, they wanted to make sure that it was clear that, oh, you're not going to have a career. Oh, you need to cover your arms. Oh, you need to wear black. Oh, you know, and then there was the unspoken stuff like, well, clearly we can't give you this role even though you sound good because, you know, right? So there was just a lot of that, and it was and sometimes it was those things were said out loud, and sometimes those things were said in front of other people in a school setting. So there was definitely fat shaming, definitely a normalizing of talking about those things. And you know, fortunately we've made some strides in our field around this, but there's a few things that I want to say about that. One is it's not acceptable ever to comment on someone's body. It's not acceptable even to comment on their clothing unless they've asked you for advice specifically, right? Um, so unsolicited anything about bodies, weight, clothing, it's unacceptable. It's 2023, friends, right? And then another thing I want to say about it is, you know, our field is slowly becoming more inclusive, but the inclusivity around what women's bodies can be shaped like, that's moving real slow.
Mm.
You know, there's all different kinds of inclusivity around race, gender, disabilities, neurodiversity, et cetera, et cetera. And an area where we have a lot of work to do is understanding that we can tell stories with any body shape or color, right? So it's not just about what is trending as far as inclusivity. It's about actually believing that somebody in a body that maybe you don't find attractive or maybe you think is wrong, other people may very much relate to and want the story told by. So, point is, we've got a long way to go still. We've made a lot of progress. It's no longer considered acceptable for your voice teacher to tell you to dress up for your lesson or wear pantyhose to suck in your belly fat or any of that nonsense that used to be totally normal. Um, but we've got a long way to go. And I think a lot of that comes from us being empowered to know what is and is not acceptable, and to know that we are worthy humans and beautiful people, regardless of what the scale says or what anybody says, really. So, yeah, it was tough. It was really, really tough, but it certainly wasn't unique. That's
Mhm.
for sure. It was just standard fare for us ladies in the zennial pocket there.
And if I understand correctly, you had a Fach change or a pressured Fach change, if I
Well,
understand.
I felt very pressured to lose weight. So I lost 100 pounds, and then my voice lightened somewhat, partially just as my body adjusted. Honestly, it really didn't lighten that much. It just lightened, as I adjusted, as I sang through the changes, facial tissue changes a little bit. There's a slight change in how you feel your support systems, etc. And but it was like immediately as soon as I became smaller, I was no longer a full lyric. And the question to me always became, were you ever a full lyric? And people just decided that it was more acceptable for a larger body to be on stage if they were categorized as a full lyric. Was I always maybe an in-betweener? But I was being pushed towards soubrette and even light lyric, sometimes even lyric coloratura repertoire, which, in my mid to late 20s, I could raise my larynx and squeeze it out my eyeballs, but it was never comfortable. And really the fact of the matter is I sit somewhere between. I'm sort of a big house Susanna and a small house Countess, let's put it that way, yeah?
Mhm.
So, yeah, so I think that there's a lot of Fach discrimination that happens depending on a person's body type. And I think that I was never a big dramatic leaning full lyric like I was meant that I was told when I was heavier. And I also think that I was never a light lyric soubrette like when I was at my smallest. But those are things affiliated with those sizes.
And it sounds like you kind of at the end of the day get to make that choice about what feels right to you and trusting your inner circle and kind of droning out all the other noise about what box you want to be put in. But going on, I mean, it sounds like we've already touched on two really important elements of gender disparity in opera. And I really admire your work at Mass Opera, having gender parity every season. And I'm wondering if you could explain what that means a bit more, and kind of
Yeah,
what that could look like for the future of opera.
totally. And hopefully we can direct people to the articles around this, who are watching. But so I founded Mass Opera 15 years ago, and over the course of 18 operas, we have had approximately 68% female identifying roles. And if you look at the data around people graduating from colleges and conservatories with voice degrees, it's the inverse, right? So, or rather, the inverse of opportunity is what's available. So, for example, we're graduating approximately 70% female identifying singers. And then in the field, they're finding closer to 60 to 70% male roles in the traditional operatic canon, which is problematic for a number of reasons. Please read the articles. And so my mission at Mass Opera is simply to reflect what the schools are graduating and what we are willingly and knowingly accepting into the field in America. So if we're going to accept those percentages, then we're going to reflect it on stage. It's controversial. Not everybody agrees with it. But I'm a raging feminist, and I like the idea of being able to make a difference to helping people find opportunities. We wouldn't be caught dead with Don Pasquale. I would be ashamed to put a work like that on the stage in 2023, unless it was completely gender bent or something. So, and P.S., that has one female role for those wondering. Yeah, so gender parity simply means that there are an equal number or more female named roles in an opera to male. It's very simple. And unfortunately, there are not a lot of operas that have good gender parity. And you can't just do Suor Angelica every season. So it requires a lot of creativity. It requires championing new works. It requires reimagining stagings, etc.
Awesome. Thank you. And you're also super candid about money in your career coachings. You talk about debt and having multiple streams of income to support your vocal career. I really love your term correlating career, and that's something that a lot of people are catching on to now. So I'm wondering if you could kind of explain what that term means and why every singer needs to know about correlating careers.
Yeah, totally. A lot of us have a lot of stigma around the idea of not being a full-time musician, whatever that means. And that could mean any number of things, right? You could be a full-time musician who's surviving on $15,000 a year and insisting on only performing or only doing, whatever your primary performing goal is. But and that's the sort of old dream, right, of like starving artist, and that's a choice, and people can make that choice for sure. But with inflation and post-pandemic and living in the realities of this country in 2023, very few humans are going to be able to make their primary living from their art. And that doesn't mean it's impossible. And I never want anyone to misunderstand or think that that's what I mean. And I encourage people to pursue their art and work really hard at it. However, the likelihood that any human who's not independently wealthy, and if you are, can I have some, is going to be able to support themselves solely on their art, it's extremely unlikely statistically. I mean, we're talking the 1% who can really make that work. And so why are we stigmatizing the other work we need to do, or calling it these derogatory terms? I think they're derogatory, like, side hustle or day job or muggle job or plan B or backup, whatever, right? I mean, you're a human being who's doing work. You might as well, A, find something you like to do or that you don't hate or that, feels comfortable to you. And B, that's lucrative. And my feeling is, and again, controversial topic, my feeling is, and what I've noticed with my career coaching clients, my students, and my colleagues, is that those who can support themselves comfortably with their correlating careers or career or whatever income streams they have will stay in the music game longer because they'll be able to afford the music game. Speaking as a singer, we classical singers have enormous expenses between coachings, lessons, audition, travel, attire, recordings, websites. I could go on all day, headshots, right? That money's got to come from somewhere. And so the pushback is, oh, well, if you're not completely devoted to your craft, then you're not a real insert the artist type here. You're not a real singer. You're not a real musician. I disagree. And I think that a correlating career is not only necessary, but that it should be crafted thoughtfully, planned early, and it doesn't have to be in music. Could be in music, but it doesn't have to be in music, right? Could be anything you're interested in, passionate about, or that is lucrative enough for you to be comfortable. Flexibility is great, but it's just normalizing the fact that we have to have other income streams and not being ashamed or having excuses. That's just not honoring that part of ourselves.
Absolutely. I love the way you reframe this perceived failure, like this old school failure. So I'm wondering if you have any more tips for like good mindset. I know that a lot of musicians have a lot of shoulds and expectations for themselves. How do you maintain a good mindset for your career?
Yeah, I mean, First of all, I think making sure that whatever it is in your art, music, etc., that you're doing for because of you and not because of pressure from someone else telling you what wing of your field or industry you should be focused on. You have to follow your gut. Your gut tells you what is right. Yeah, you know. So understanding what it is that you love, that you're good at, right? You want to intersect your skill set with your passion, with what's lucrative, ideally. Ideally, you want to find those beautiful intersections. Other mindset things, I mean, obviously imposter syndrome is huge. And honestly, the thing that has probably had the most impact on me in over all the years is simply the phrase comparison is the thief of joy. If you're going to compare yourself forever to other people, you first of all are not going to realize your full potential as an artist, and second of all, you're just not going to be happy because we're all different. There's room for all of us to be contributing in our industries, um, but to sit and compare until the day you die is not a good life. So
Agreed.
mm.
I'm wondering if you get any pushback about your beliefs, either from your own colleagues or from the establishment, because, you know, this is a really traditional, sometimes super conservative field, classical music.
Definitely pushback. Um, a colleague of mine asked me like 2 years ago, maybe, don't you ever worry you're going to advocate yourself? You're going to advocate to the point that you advocate your way out of work. And I'm like, no, no, I don't worry about that at all. Partially because I'm in the position where I'm not interested in working in a traditional old school setting. I would never do that. So it's a non-factor. But yes, I get pushback from the good old boys clubs of opera. I get pushback from, you know, and I don't mean to sound ageist at all, but I do get pushback from older generations who simply don't understand how the industry's changed over the years, because the industry has changed in a lot of ways, you know. Um, Even just in the last 15 years, getting an audition to be heard live for a young artist program, for example, that didn't used to be a difficult thing. Now it's like unusual if you get an audition, even. I mean, the industry has changed so much in ways that we don't have time to discuss, but get pushback from people who haven't kind of kept up. Get pushback from some of the biggest pushback I get is from people who have winner's mindset, who are in the 1%, who have made it to whatever is perceived as the top in quotation marks, who in a lot of cases have gotten there from being in a position of privilege or being in the right place at the right time. I mean, I'm sure they've also worked very hard, but a lot of the pushback is, well, if you're running into a wall, then you're not working hard enough, right? So I get pushback around that. I get pushback around the whole like correlating careers are detracting from your music, you know, that conversation. I get pushback when I encourage colleges and conservatories to rethink their admissions, because admissions are not reflective of the field, and the scholarship, the way that scholarship is distributed is also extremely problematic. Please see the articles. So yeah, I definitely get pushback. When I first started really digging into this work, I 100% took all of the haters personally. 100%. I would cry all the time. And I would delete comments and just be like, my hands would shake because it feels scary. And somebody said to me, if they're not mad, you're not doing something of impact. So it's like I've completely transformed over the last 3 or 4 years, in that you can say whatever you want. I believe in the work, 100%. And I used to want to engage with haters or pushback and engage in like mind changing, and in general, that's not worth your time. You focus your energy on the people who are going to take our industry from here, not the people who aren't gonna who don't understand and who don't want to listen. I don't waste my time with that anymore. I focus on the people who are change makers and encouraging them and supporting them in any way I can.
I'm wondering what keeps you fighting and what makes you stick around with classical music when so often it's really difficult to stay in.
It is. And I mean, I didn't totally stay with my original plan in that, yes, I run an opera company, but I myself don't sing opera as much anymore, which is partially because I have two little kids. But also largely because there's a lot of toxic stuff going on that I personally don't enjoy being in the room for, or in the running for. So I sing opera occasionally, but I really shifted my focus. The biggest shifting probably happened around 10 years ago. I started really shifting to oratorio and concert work, which has been such a better fit for me and has really like allowed me to continue to do my art and be fulfilled and sing beautiful music, without the toxicity and with a better paycheck if you're looking at a per hour basis, right? Um, but classical music is my jam. I mean, I have always loved opera, oratorio, art song, new music. I can't belt. You really don't want to hear me try, truly. Like, I am so admiring of crossover singers, but I am not one. I do sing jazz. So not everybody knows that about me, but I did grow up with a father who's a jazz musician. So I do sing jazz. In fact, I will be singing some jazz on an upcoming recital. And
Exciting.
yeah, so I learned how to scat and all that fun stuff. So I do like that, and I listen to lots of other styles. I love hip hop, mostly 90s hip hop. Um, but yeah, classical is just that's my passion. But I definitely have shifted within classical to a broader focus on oratorio and concert work. So um, this past June 2021, I was fortunate to sing both the Brahms Requiem and the Mozart Requiem at Carnegie Hall. And yeah, bring me all the requiems, all the messiahs, all the Beethoven nines. I am here for all of that.
You're our soprano, you're our oratorio soprano. Well, kind of shifting focus, it sounds like we're talking about kind of what's fulfilling in our lives and finding what is and isn't fulfilling in the operatic and oratorio industry. I'm wondering how you manage work-life balance. What are some tips for mindset? What keeps you from burnout?
Work-life balance is a never-ending struggle. I think for all of us, especially just because the cost of living in many of the metropolitan areas has become so out of control that a lot of us are really struggling to find a way to do it all. Um, for me, I would say I abide by a few principles that help, because I'm not going to say that I have it mastered. I certainly don't. But like I said, I have found what rest means to me. I have occasional massages and I budget for that. I enjoy Reiki. I enjoy crochet. I like to bike. I became a bike commuter recently. So that has really, all of those things help my mental health. I also have a personal trainer, which, being strong is important to me. Um, and another thing that I abide by, so one is finding what rest and self-care means to you, because this whole like bubble bath, whatever, sit and stare at a wall, like, even I love nature, but like for me, going on a 2 hour like walk alone through nature is not appealing to me. I would love to be in nature with someone else, with friends, but like I'm not going to go on a 2 hour hike alone, because that's not what rest is to me, right? So figuring that out. And then another thing, in my work life, especially, as someone who runs an opera company and an LLC, etc., when in doubt, farm it out. Right? If you can set up your life in a way, this is also in my personal life too, like if you need to get a house cleaner, get a house cleaner. If you need a babysitter, budget for it. If you are running a business and things are going well, as was the case for me, then um, both for my mental health and my time management, I hired a social media person to help me. I have interns. So, um, delegation is so important. You can't do everything yourself. And I would laugh if you told me that at 28, 29. But now, like, there's nothing more important. You can't have time management without delegation and self-care. So those are the things that are crucial. And I would say the thing that the sort of last piece that I'm really working on right now is presence, putting the phone away. If I have that beautiful, blessed time with my kids, like be there, be present. And that can be hard when our brains are in a million different places. And something that really helped me was reading the book Do Nothing by Celeste Headley. Highly recommend it. It was wonderful for mindset shifting and for like a non woo woo, hippy dippy kind of way to look at mindfulness and being present. So,
Thank you so much for that recommendation. I'm gonna
yeah,
have to get on that. That sounds like a good book.
it is. It's great. And Celeste Headley is a former opera singer trained at, I think, University of Michigan. So
Look at that.
look at that.
Well, this has been a wonderful interview. I want to close it out by asking you a few questions. I'm
Sure.
wondering what makes you feel successful, what brings you joy, and lastly, what makes you feel empowered?
Okay. Sure. Let me think about it for a second. What makes me feel successful? What makes me feel successful, honestly, is when I get the texts from my students saying, I literally got a text yesterday or 2 days ago that was like, I was able to sustain the high F. Oh my gosh, my gig is going to be okay. Or, I'll get a little audio clip of somebody singing something that I know that I helped them with. I get notes from my career coaching clients about how their private studio is full. I get notes from people who renegotiated a contract because of a conversation we had. I get notes, tons of notes from people who work with Mass Opera talking about, how important the experience was, how well they were treated, how wonderful it was to be, represented on stage. So those are the things that make me feel successful is just knowing that I'm helping people and making an impact. Um, what brings me joy? My children, sleep. Uh, let's see. My children, sleep, biking, um, baking, cooking, redecorating, spending time with my friends, travel in small doses. Those things bring me lots of joy. Um, and what makes me feel empowered, is that the last question?
Yep.
Um, I feel empowered by following figureheads that I admire, such as Brene Brown, Glennon Doyle, even Oprah Winfrey. There are lots of people that I consider role models that help me feel empowered. Um, I feel empowered by my family and having entrepreneur parents. I feel empowered by everyone who has been moved by the work through the Empowered Singers group on Facebook, the Empowered Musician, Mass Opera. Um, and I feel empowered by my anxiety
Who would have
because
thought?
it has driven me, it's a double-edged sword, but it's my little buddy that has driven me to make an impact and to do something about the things. There's nothing worse than the person who wants to whine and not make change. There's nothing worse than that. You have to put your money where your mouth is or accept it. So thank you, little buddy anxiety, for empowering me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you to anxiety, because we would not be here without Dana Varga. Thank you so much for creating this
Thank
community on the
you.
Empowered Musician, and Happy New Year to all the viewers watching.
Yes.
Go
Happy New
forth
Year,
being
everyone.
empowered.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.